But if you look at stories like the AI story and some of the Korean stocks connected to that, to what degree is all of that immune from whatever is happening on the political landscape, and do you buy at these levels?
Yeah, Paul, I think you've seen it be a little bit immune because technology has been the outperformer, which has been a more challenged part of the market on a year-to-date basis, where financials, which has been the strength of the Korean market all year, has been a little bit weaker. But it comes to a key theme that whether it's Korea or anywhere else in the world, I've been talking with investors a lot about lately, which is this idea of selectivity. You can choose any market in the world, and there's going to be good and bad investments. And particularly in Korea, where you do have exposure to the artificial intelligence theme, you've got a number of companies in the semi space that have done very well and should continue to do well. Their earnings aren't necessarily tied to political issues with respect to Korea. It's tied to markets that continue to do well. So as they fall on that news, those certainly look a little bit more interesting, but I think you do have to be very selective, and this isn't a market I would be looking at just to buy broadly speaking. I'd want to pick and choose my places within.
Matt, what do you make of South Korean hardware companies, especially around chips? I've heard the notion that perhaps software will be the trend when it comes to 2025, given, of course, also that we're headed towards potentially more tariffs and just trade tensions all around with an incoming Trump administration.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. On one hand, if there is a change in regime, if the ruling leader, if Lee on the other political side kind of takes power, he does seem to be a little bit more Trumpian, at least with respect to tone. Maybe that's an overture to help mitigate some of the potential tariffs that could be levied on a country like Korea. But Korea is also a key ally with respect to China. So there could be a little bit of easing or more negotiations that are held as a result of that. I do think software is a key area of focus for me, particularly small cap software companies in the US. Around the rest of the world, I think we're going to have to see how a lot of those trends play out. I'm a little bit reticent to say that Korean companies that haven't already captured some of those gains are going to do well just because the fundamentals haven't changed.
Matt Orton, Chief Market Strategist at Raymond James Investment Management. It was really great talking to you. Thank you. South Korea is urging tourists to continue visiting while actively engaging with foreign governments over the safety of travel groups. That's as political tensions simmer following the now impeached president's failed martial law attempt. I spoke exclusively to the government spokesperson and Culture, Tourism and Sports Minister Yoons.
So we've been doing well, but this time something like this has happened in the middle of the administration. So in my case, I think that changes in the external environment will take time to be resolved. And internally, it's very important for us to communicate with each other, especially through culture. So in times like this, I think we should play a role in providing some comfort to people abroad. And I'm pushing ahead with my work with that in mind.
We have seen a long history of civil movements in South Korea, protests as well, and maybe a lot of drastic political measures, including several martial law declarations in this country. What do you think it takes when it comes to bringing stability to the government and to society as well? As a culture minister, when you see the trends in South Korean society, is this something that you think about?
I think it is very crucial that any expression can be voiced. That's another form of democracy, where people can come out in the square and talk to each other without being hindered, speaking out at ease. Once this time passes, there will be a time when they can communicate well among each other. Of course, at first there will be a gap, so they may clash, and the voices may become louder because of different opinions. But in the end, they will continue to clash and exchange views with one another. And through this process, they will get to bridge the gap and communicate. Of course, it can be a disadvantage on the one hand, but on the other hand, it is a very strong point that democracy is guaranteed and it's working properly.
Are you having conversations with other countries' government officials? Who are you hearing from?
At first, everyone was very surprised. Now, as time goes by, people seem to feel that social life is proceeding as usual. There are no major changes or cancellations at the moment. If you have plans to travel to Korea, go on a business trip or attend a conference, I would like to tell you that there is no problem if you come as planned.
From all of the government initiatives that you're working on, there have been reports that perhaps some of the regional festivals have been downsized, that a lot of the big works cannot be done anymore. What are you seeing so far?
Right now, there are festivals going on. It's the end of the year and there's also Christmas, so the atmosphere should be a little upbeat. But our political atmosphere is frozen right now, so local governments are staying low-key or scaling down the size of events. However, from my point of view, I'm telling organisers to proceed festivals as planned if possible, but it seems difficult to hold such festivals in full scale in this atmosphere. So the economy is a little bit strained at the moment, so I'm recommending that local governments should not cancel those events and festivals. They should hold such events so that they can provide some comfort to the people's hearts.
Do you expect that, though, to have a lasting impact on the broader economy if people are not going out to celebrate at this very holiday peak season?
I think domestic demand is being affected a little bit, as well as the stock market. But what's really important is the external credibility of Korea, not only in terms of the country's economy, but also in all other areas, such as trust and credibility. If this continues, we may find ourselves in a more difficult situation with investment outflows or declines.
That was Yoons, the South Korean Culture, Tourism and Sports Minister and government spokesperson. We have more ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg.
A massive fire rages on throughout North
When AI models are open source, they're available.
Incoming Prime Minister here, Bayrou, I mean, he's a veteran centrist. He's supported Macron's government throughout the course of his administration. But at this point, I mean, in order to really kind of get things done here in France and to really hold on to this position and to pass a budget, he's really going to need to consolidate a lot of these fractured political groups within France. And of course, that starts with Le Pen's party. I mean, this far-right party certainly has, this majority. They really have a commanding presence here. And I think the fact that it's really her up first who he's meeting with illustrates just how much power she's really amassed in government, even if she's not the president right now. But ultimately, I mean, this really does come down to an issue of whether Bayrou can be the one to actually, consolidate all of these parties and help get this budget passed. Of course, his predecessor, Barnier, was the shortest-serving premier, in decades in France. So really, I think at this point, it's just trying to get all of these different groups to kind of consolidate their interests and get something together. How successful successful he's ultimately going to be there, I think we'll still have to see.
What will Marine Le Pen be looking to extract from Prime Minister Bayrou, especially in terms of the budget and getting that passed?
Well, Paul, at this point, what Le Pen wants from this government is for them to take a less aggressive approach to cutting the deficit. That's been one of the main sticking points here. Of course, that might be, something that's a bit hard for the centrist government to stomach. And ultimately, some of the issues here are whether or not you can actually get some more of the leftist parties, even the far left, to actually bite on a plan like that. They also have some disagreements over how exactly the administration would necessarily handle immigration. That's something obviously, that Le Pen feels very strongly about. So there are some different things here that it's not entirely sure whether or not this government is going to be able to come together on some of these issues. All of this, of course, against the backdrop that Moody's ratings just cut its credit rating for France, down a bit on a lot of these concerns over this budget uncertainty. So that's really just kind of adding to some of the pressures here to get things done. But again, that does require sort of consolidating and bringing together a lot of these very fractured groups in France right now.
All right, News Desk editor Jill Desis there. Investors are set to focus on chip makers, bank stocks and dollar-denominated debt next year to shield their Asian investments from uncertain US trade policies and a strong dollar. For more, let's bring in Asia stocks reporter John Cheng. So, John, when it comes to top trades in Asia, China is still the centre of attention. What are fund managers recommending?
So definitely China is still top of mind for a lot of EM investors. China is still a heavyweight in the EM index. And, we've seen a nice rebound since the policy pivot we saw in September. Of course, last week, the Central Economic Work Conference came as a little bit of a disappointment, but the overall policy direction is still, we're expecting more fiscal and monetary stimulus from Beijing next year. So, for a lot of fund managers, if they want to participate in China's rebound, one way could be to buy into onshore Chinese equities, according to Fidelity, which is more exposed to sectors like consumption, like property, that are direct beneficiaries of Beijing's stimulus policies. And another way to play China's rebound would be, buying Chinese bank stocks, because, we're looking at improving fundamentals next year, and also, a high dividend of this sector, which is very appealing to a lot of investors, especially when the PBOC is already in an easing mode. And also in previous episodes, where we saw, there are a lot of macro uncertainties. For example, we get a strong dollar and also Donald Trump coming into office, which means we are potentially seeing more tariffs against China. And in this kind of scenario, the banking sector has really outperformed in previously. So, that could offer some safety for investors as well.
Which is why we have also seen interest in other parts of the world, right? Especially when it comes to rerouting those supply chains. What other markets in the region are winning investors' interest right now?
So during our conversations with fund managers, definitely the name of India came up a lot. It's touted as being one of the major manufacturing alternatives to China, and according to fund managers, they're saying India stocks still have more upside going into next year. Of course, we've seen soft patches in the economy, we've seen soft patches in the earnings growth, but overall, speaking of the overall structural growth story, India is still looking very promising there. And one way to play, the urbanization theme and the, evolving economy of India would be to buy large cap names in, for example, financial sector, healthcare sector, and industrial sector versus their small cap peers. And another way to play India's growth would be to buy local bonds, where, investors are saying, this country's small external debt would, and also inclusion in global bond index this year is really benefiting that sector. And also Indonesia has come up a lot, similar to India, is a very domestic driven economy, and also we've seen the central bank really stepping up defense of the currency lately. So Indonesian sovereign debt would be one of the top trades recommended by investors, and on the equity side, then we're looking at probably Indonesian banks as well.
All right, Asia Stocks reporter John Cheng there. Well, Chinese social media users have given US President-elect Donald Trump several nicknames over the years. They're not very flattering. They range from capricious to baby. His latest, though, according to Bloomberg opinion columnist Shili Ren, is perhaps the most interesting, that of nation builder. Shili joins us now in Hong Kong to explain why. So, Shili, why do some people believe that Trump could be good for China?
So some people think that Trump 2.0 will accelerate economic structural reforms that Beijing has been dithering on. I mean, looking back at 2018, what happened after Trump launched the first trade war? China devalued the yuan, weakened the yuan, and China also double down on industrial policies by flooding out like structural industrial companies with a lot of bank loans. And it seems to me that it seems to a lot of people that those measures are not going to work anymore, right? That the yuan cannot be much cheaper because there will be capital outflow, and then the industrial policy is worrying the whole world. The whole world is worried that China is exporting its industrial overcapacity. So what some people think is that Beijing is going to come back to the domestic economy to boost the GDP growth. I mean, at this point, China's exports to the U.S. accounts for 3% of China's GDP, but its whole domestic consumption is only 40% of the GDP, way lower than Japan's 55% or Brazil's 63%. So some think that if China is just going to boost its consumption rate by like 2 or 3 percentage points, that's going to buffer the Trump tariff threat.
Actually, when it comes to boosting the domestic economy, boosting domestic demand, that's been a key issue and something that's been very challenging for policymakers, right? What are the policies that can
You ready, guys?
There's plans for a Bitcoin reserve. We'll see how that works, but the Bitcoin strategic reserve intended to become a reality under the Trump administration. Right, Korea, the market of the moment. We're seeing pretty decent gains for the Kospi. It's erased all the bad things that happened ever since the brief declaration of martial law on December the 3rd. It also seems to be a floor under the Korean won as well, 1,432 at the moment. And we also heard this morning that the joint investigating team probing President Yoons' botched martial law attempt is now going to ask him to appear for questioning at 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning. Yoon facing charges of treason and abuse of authority, Sherry.
Yeah, we'll continue to bring you the latest developments from here in Seoul, but that's it for the Asia trade. Our markets coverage continues as we look ahead to the start of trade in Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Shenzhen. The China show is next. This is Bloomberg.